everyone, to our tribute for Johnny Crawford, an actor, a horseman, a singer, a big band leader, really a multifaceted individual. I'm privileged to introduce Mr. Crawford's brother, Bobby, and sister, Nance. Hello, hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
We're going to talk about Johnny at length in a few moments. So let's have the two of you introduce yourselves right now.
Well, I'm Nance.
Nance is a senior here.
I'm Nance.
And I'm Bobby. And we're glad to be here and to talk about John.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's make sure the crowd knows who you are. So, Ms. Crawford, you are an author, a playwright, a composer, an actress with a focus on theater. What do you think you're most proud of and would want to be remembered by for at this point in your life?
At this point in my life, I would like my music to take off. I've spent the 70s trying to be a country singer in LA. This was not a profitable venture.
Little tough crowd there in Los Angeles, yes.
Yeah. And then the kids grew up and life got more complicated. And I just pulled out my guitar after 30 years and I'm reteaching myself the songs that I wrote.
Well, it sounds like you have musical family then.
Yes, we are definitely that. We are very definitely that. I've been very fortunate because I did not pursue film after my children were born. I moved to Nashville. Agent wasn't willing to fly me out for interviews, and then came back from Nashville and had aged out of my childhood agent. I just never got another agent. But I have participated in local theater in the San Fernando Valley, and I'm fortunate enough to have gotten a couple of acting awards and directing award. And that's a wonderful thing for me because I write plays too. So,
wow.
Yeah.
You got some chops. You got some chops there.
Yeah, a little bit. Just I haven't had anything to chew on in terms of my bank account.
They don't give awards to people who aren't doing well. So I have to say that's an acknowledgement that you've done some really amazing things.
I've done some fun stuff. I got my award for supporting actor in a production of Gigi. I played Mamita.
Mm.
And my Gigi is a girl who's now known as Ginger, the vintage girl. And she's known as Ginger and the Who's Your Daddies? And she sang at our wedding with Johnny's band.
Ginger Folly? Is it Ginger Folly?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Small world. We all, yes. Okay. Vintage Ginger. I know her. All right.
And the other things are mostly plays. I write comedy. Got a couple of musicals under my belt that have been workshopped like crazy.
King's Games.
Oh yeah, King's Games. I wrote a play about Richard III. It's in verse, and it's in print through Amazon. My musical, The Christmas Dragon, was turned into a book because we couldn't find a producer who was willing to take the chance on Christmas. And it's called Dragon Solstice, and they're both available on Amazon. So there's the plug. And thank you, Bob, because I wouldn't have thought I'm not mercenary, can you tell?
It's nice to have a supportive sibling, let me tell you. All right. Well, so speaking of you, Bobby, which it feels awkward to call someone Bobby when I've just met them, but I mean, if I call you Mr. Crawford, either way, it's all for respect.
Call me Bobby. I've been lucky, I guess, to be a legend in my own time in a little way, almost famous with the Laramie series. Mm-hmm. And I found myself in the last 20 years going to festivals now and again. And somehow I just feel comfortable being at that point in my life, able to say I'm Bobby Crawford. And I think it stems from my pride in being named after my grandfather and my father. But Bobby Crawford was something, they called him the Napoleon of the Tin Pan Alley. After World War I, he came in and became a vice president of Irving Berlin's publishing company, and then went out to publish his own company and manage Al Jolson, and had a wonderful Crawford music label, but was always known as Bobby Crawford. He'd been a jockey as well. And so I felt I had something of a legacy and maybe a little push in the DNA that would give me some success.
That's
So
amazing.
I
I
like
mean,
being called Bobby.
truly an entertainment family. So you were a childhood actor, okay, and you were in, you certainly were in Laramie, but you also were in Zorro, the Donna Reed Show, Mr. Novak, The Rifleman, Gunsmoke, and what are your memories of those TV shows?
It was just a lark. We were so lucky. Our Sunday school teacher was a big agent for children in town. She was a wonderful lady, instilled great faith in both of us at Sunday school, and then said, let me send you out. And so I remember getting interviews and getting little industrial films where I go to the Frito factory and be able to eat the Fritos hot off the press. And that was a thrill. And to play an Indian somehow on an ice cream commercial and yummed up the ice cream. But I was so lucky to be able to do these things as like going to camp and going away for a weekend or whatever. They were short spells, but each production was a big deal. You were surrounded by a lot of professionals. It was at the high end of the industry. I mean, we began because my dad was an editor or assistant editor at Columbia Pictures. And I remember among the first things we did was to be one of the 5,000 fingers of Dr. T. And we were on the piano and being called in regularly with 500 other kids on this big piano. And Tommy Reddick, I think it was, that was the star in the show. And then years later on the Donna Reed Show, be able to have a speaking role with Hans Conrad, who had played Dr. Seuss's character. And then we were on 10 Tall Men as extras, and I always felt, oh, I've been in a Burt Lancaster movie. But what it led to finally was a break in my teens and junior high. I got the lead in a Playhouse 90 called Child of Our Time. And it was only on TV twice in that season and never more.
Huh.
Fortunately, there's a 16 millimeter print of it. I've got it. My friend Stacy transferred it to a digital, but it can't be found unless you go to the TV museum in New York City.
Oh boy.
But that show was nominated for several Emmys. I was nominated for a performance of a lead in that one-time episode, along with Paul Muni, who had been in it. Not in that, but there was Paul Muni and Mickey Rooney and Fred Astaire. I was in good company.
Oh my gosh.
And Christopher Plummer.
And Christopher Plummer. That's right. And I got to go to the Emmy Awards and sit in front of Fred Astaire, who was behind me, and ended up winning the award and coming back and patting me and saying, you should have won that one. So it's just kind of magical what happened to all of us being in Hollywood in the right place at the right time.
Now, wasn't 1959, wasn't that a year that multiple Crawfords were up for Emmys?
Remarkable that Johnny was nominated for The Rifleman as supporting actor, and my dad was nominated for the Bob Cummings Show as editor. None of us won, but the three family members caused a bit of a stir. And
I don't think I can't imagine a time that I've ever heard that happening.
Yeah, that was them. Yeah, that was the only time it ever did.
It did. We have lovely memento photos of the moment in time. And in my life, I just have had those moments come along again and again. And just call me Lucky Bob.
Like, part of the reason why you might have thought of this as fun is because you might have had some stable parents that helped you. I get the impression that when people like let's say Rance Howard and his brother, and when they said they had fun making the movies, and I want to say Richie Cunningham, which is silly, but you know who I'm talking about, Ron Howard. It seems like the parents were able to make their environment so comfortable that it did seem like some form of fun. I'm not saying there wasn't, difficult times or what have you, but we've been good friends with Diana Sarah Carey, baby Peggy, who, when she was, she's since passed, but when she was able to talk about her times, and she had an amazing recollection of being 5 years old, making movies. And she didn't have quite the stable parent environment, and it really made things difficult for her. So I'm thrilled to hear when people say, no, I had fun. I enjoyed making the movies, or, yes, it was work, but so it's great to hear that. It's nice to hear about stable something.
Well, there's something interesting that you can consider when you talk about that, is that most of the people who had stable film childhoods were kids who grew up in the business because their families were in the business. We worked in a factory town. Our dad worked in a factory. In fact, I don't know if you ever noticed in that Wyatt Earp movie that James Garner made, that they at one point they went to the editing rooms at a studio.
Oh.
And I look at this thing, and now it's all painted and beautiful because they're making a movie there, right? And but that was the place where our dad worked, and it was like a motel of 3 or 4 stories, and there was a sound stage area behind it because it's right on Sunset and Gower in Hollywood. And we'd go to visit and walk up these metal stairs, like a fire escape, to these metal walkways. And there would dad would be in a 10 by 10 foot room for the day with his back to the door, looking at his moviola, and film hanging everywhere. And in those days, of course, it was nitrate film, so nobody smoked in there.
No, it wasn't nitrate. This is after the war.
This is after the war.
After the silent movies.
Yeah, but I mean, film is still volatile if it starts happening, But at any rate, they just it was a factory town. When we went to public schools until they landed their series. We would I'd get a call from Grandma, Grandma would get a call. And we would, or I'd get a message in school saying you have to be ready immediately to be picked up because you have something to do in the film.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Because we all started out as extras.
Yeah.
So we got before any of the fanciness of having to learn lines and knowing your mark and all of that, we got a good education in how films happen. And it's a factory. And that's the only way and people don't understand that. They just don't understand it. And so people who grew up in this business, who had parents who knew the business, our mother had been a contract player at Warner Brothers. Her name was Ann Lovett there. You can find it nowhere because she wasn't there that long. She went and married this fellow that came along, and they produced me. And then that was bye-bye. And then she knew Bob Crawford the 3 of them hung out a lot. And he just waited till she got divorced, and by God, he married her.
Patient man, that's good.
I wish he'd been a little bit more patient. I would have liked to have been in that mix too.
Well, I see it a little differently in terms of my experience growing up. Sitting and watching my parents do stage work and playing Hamlet and dueling on the stage, and being 5 and 6 years old watching them do that, saying that's a fun thing to do. And my mom was a very accomplished pianist, and my dad was a sportsman and took up fencing. I didn't realize till years later he'd done it as a kid in camp. But he came back, and the one thing he could get on the GI Bill was free lessons at the Falcon School of Fencing. And Faulkner was making movies like The Black Pirate and staging the fencing episodes in those, but he'd been an Olympic fencer and a champion. And he was really just a star in his own right. He had a presence about him that was commanding. And anyhow, we would go to his school to tap dance. I guess we always felt as children we were going to be performers. It would be nice to be like Fred Astaire and do, not that we saw those movies, because at that point we just getting television, and the $1 Million Movie would come on now and again. But John had always somehow had a fascination with the silent movies. And so even while we were on our Tremaine Avenue house in Hollywood, we had a backyard, and we'd throw a sheet over the clothesline, and John would have these 8mm films and be running William S. Hart on the bed sheet for the kids in the neighborhood. And we'd run down to the store and come back with candy bars. We'd sell at twice the price. And we ended up doing that again when we moved into the Hollywood Hills, and we had a den that we could bring in the screen and had friends and family come over to watch what were great films. But John was authority on it. He bought books on it. We'd go to the silent movie theater in Hollywood and watch Charlie Chase as well as Chaplin and Harold Lloyd. And it wasn't until years later, I mean, John from the beginning knew Mabel Normand and the people in these movies and William S. Hart, and just loved the idea of it. Well, it's a long story that I'm getting into. My point is, he became a cowboy before he got on the rifleman. My dad had been in a military academy in New York and had horses and would take us to what now is the Beverly Center, but at the time was a little pony corral, and put us on the ponies, and we'd go around in circles when we're 4 and 5 years old.
Yeah, and there was that was the park that Disney took his daughters to.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And got the idea for Disneyland because it was, Coney Island, all of these places, even our wharf out here in Santa Monica was, had
the
carousel and all kinds of stuff on it, but they were not clean. And he wanted American families to bring their children. But I was just thinking, as you were talking about all the comedies that we saw, having done this, our parents took us to the silent movies a lot. I'm sure you don't remember as much as I do.
I remember the compendiums that we would go see too.
Yeah, but the one that impressed me the most was, because I was impressed with anything that was a movie, but nonetheless, there's a wonderful film, I forget what the title of it is, with John Barrymore, and it was a romance of some sort or something about a war, and everybody was in costume. But to experience a silent film that is dramatic and somebody's playing serious music behind it, as we know, they all had orchestrations for the original openings of these things. I can remember being 11, 12 years old and thinking, and really taking a deep breath and going, this is much, what we do today is easy compared to what those people did, and still were able to, I could remember Lillian Gish going absolutely nuts.
In the Wind, yes.
I mean, that's one of the most brilliant scenes I think I've ever seen on a silent movie screen.
I know the Beloved Road. That's a John Barrymore. Maybe that was the John Barrymore movie you're thinking of. But what I can say is, let me back us up a little bit, because you've covered a lot of territory. So of course we were going to be talking about your brother Johnny Crawford, and so he had there was the BJ Theater that you and Johnny actually set up with showing silent films, 8mm silent films. You had your own theater. In fact, there's an article from a magazine that we'll have the link to on our website that was talking about the BJ Theater. And then you all went as a family, went to the silent movie theater on Fairfax in Los Angeles, and you observed silent movies. Okay, so I want to make sure everybody's up to speed, because you've got there's a lot to cover here. So that's exciting. So people might be saying, well, yeah, why are you talking to Johnny Crawford's family and about you? Because, you're a silent film museum. Well, yes, but there are several reasons. And I actually didn't start out talking about this, but not only is he a silent film fan, and you're all involved with the movie industry, which that's good enough as far as I'm concerned, but he was also in a film that had the title, The Resurrection of Bronco Billy. Now, we'll be talking about that in a moment, but the main thing is his character's name was Bronco Billy. It wasn't Bronco Billy Anderson. He wasn't playing the Bronco Billy of our name that our film museum is named after, as far as Essanay. Anderson is the A. But there's a connection. So we'll get to that in a moment. The main thing is, I do want to keep going on about, so you got to work, you were talking about fencing, and I think that's important for people to know, that you and and Johnny both were fencers, and you were on the Mickey Mouse Club fencing, right?
What they did is sent out a call, and the Falcon Studios said they've sent out a call for talent, children with skills. And so go out to Disney and audition your fencing abilities. And we went out to Disney and got in front of the panel and bouted a bit for them and said, thank you very much. And went back to Grandma, who was sitting there watching, and she said, Johnny, go back and tell them you sing too. And Johnny went back and said, yes, and I can sing. They said, you can, we'll do it. And he sang Johnny Ray's song, Cry. And he would do such a job on it that was to knock him over. And that got him a role as a regular.
Well, so actually, I didn't realize that's how he got to the Mouseketeers, was because so fencing came first. Both of you were doing that, and that was what you got you in the door. So the first year of the Mickey Mouse Club, there's 24 Mouseketeers. He's one of them, and then the hammer came down by the second year because they wanted to focus their energies on fewer kids.
I was told by Grandma, who knew everything, she knew all. She was told that it came down to a choice between Johnny or Cubby, because they were both short, and there was Karen was in the mix. And Johnny's specialty, he had no other specialty, but Cubby had the drums. And
singing and fencing is good. I mean, that's
yeah. But the thing you have to remember is the call went out for kids, but it was kids who could tap dance. They had to be able to tap dance. And I was aged out because I was too old, because I'm 6 years older than John. So, and besides, I never tapped. I did ballet. So he just...
So let me get this straight. He's tap dancing, fencing, and singing.
Yeah. And doing ballet.
Wow. That's
the other story on the Mouseketeers is they were going to the cafeteria one day, Grams and Johnny.
Yes.
And this gentleman came out, and it happened to be Walt Disney. And as he walked by, he said, hi, Johnny. And Johnny was struck by that. He says, Grams, he knows who I am. And then she pointed to his shirt.
That's good. That's very good. Well, so that's got him. So that now we're talking about Johnny, but also you still have that connection. You were also in a movie too with him.
Yeah, we did.
And the Rifleman.
A couple of episodes on the Rifleman just before I did the Playhouse 90, and then I got on to Laramie. And then that took us a couple of more years for John doing the Rifleman and me bouncing around on about 60 television shows while I was trying to get through high school and somehow get to UCLA and find out what I was really going to do when I grew up. And John was fully occupied on the set there and taught. I was lucky. I kept going back to public school. I'd be gone for a day or two or a weekend. But my short story is John graduates. Finally, he finishes the Rifleman in 61 or 62, I forgot. But he went to his senior year at Hollywood High, where we'd all been going to Hollywood High, and then graduated. And that year led us to Norman Foster and Dad and an independent production of Indian Paint. And Indian Paint was a book. It featured a boy with his horse, and John, back to Johnny, in his first season went to St. Louis, and a rancher there said, I'll send you a pony I've got coming along. And he sent him this Pinto pony that was 6 months old and landed in Griffith Park stable with Johnny. And Johnny, being on the set every day with wranglers, wanted to train the horse, and he did. And he got it to roll over and sit up and count, and then became his roping horse for calf roping and steer roping as the years went along. But this is 63, and Two Bits now is about 5 years old. And so Norman Foster had done Disney movies. This was going to be an independent production financed out of a Texas millionaire who lived outside of Dallas in Cleburne, Texas, and the Brazos River. and they were going to do the story about the Indians before the white man came, or the white man had come because there were horses, but they hadn't come to their territory yet. And so we thought that was grand, that we could play Native Americans and be there, and that Two Bits could be the movie star as well. And it's really about the pony first through most of the episode, but it put Johnny and I in the picture together, playing not brothers, but tribal rivals in that he was the chief's son and I was the medicine man's son, and we would be battling. And again, like on the Rifleman, the real joy was that we got to wrestle in the mud and our little wrestling scene, but mostly that we got to go to Cleveland, Texas for 4 weeks and make a movie about Indians and the West at that time. And it was rugged and it was low budget. And my dad was the associate producer and editor on it. And at that time, I was simply still a kid actor who just show up, get made up, say my lines, and have fun while they set up the next shot with the neighbors and after shooting and getting to the motel and jumping in the pool because it was hot down there.
Yeah.
And so and John, of course, had to work harder because he's in every scene while I'm out lollygagging with the gang. And my dad is patching together this production that's a shoestring on how they got their costumes made, how you make a movie in a town that doesn't have a movie industry and hadn't had at that point, even Dallas in 1963 had no real production facilities. I only appreciate this in hindsight, having been now both on low budget and the high budget films, to know what it takes out of everybody that's behind the camera.
Well, I can imagine, I mean, the picture of you, the two of you together, your brothers, I mean, it's obvious, but if you separate and you kind of, I would imagine with the proper, you can like pass for not brothers. But I'm sure though that behind the scenes, it was still nice to be around your brother.
It was great. And we followed up that show going on the junior rodeo circuit. By that time, John was pretty accomplished at riding the bulls and the horses, and he had learned how to fall off the horses while doing the Rifleman. And so he was anxious to do it with Two Bits, and we got him in his gold Oldsmobile and gold trailer and went to Wyoming, where we met up with Don McLaughlin, who was a champion horse calf roper at the time, a national champion many times over, and his brother Gene, who was a great trick roper. And John had known Gene, who was trick roping and a wrangler on the Rifleman and a stuntman. And anyhow, the short story is we went from Wyoming down through Colorado and New Mexico and Texas to the junior rodeo circuit for about 6 weeks. And on our trip down from Colorado Springs to Roswell, the road made a sudden L turn, and we did too, unexpectedly, and rolled Two Bits in his horse trailer over.
I haven't heard this one.
Oh no.
And, got out and found out that Two Bits wasn't too fazed by that. Clambered out of the roof of the trailer, and we tied him up. And fortunately, people came along. I don't remember the police coming along, but we were able to get help enough to get the trailer in. And it was marvelous luck again that we hooked it all up. The Oldsmobile wasn't phased, the trailer was battered, but we could get Two Bits in it. It rolled, and we rolled into the next rodeo, and everybody is looking at our shiny rig that has been demolished, and the horse is still alive.
You know what? I think you are lucky, Bobby.
Yes, right?
Wow.
I'm sticking close to you, kid.
So okay, I'm not even sure how to answer. Okay, so if we go back to Johnny with, he's in I want to say Three Musketeers. He's in the Mouseketeers. Okay, so he's in the Mickey Mouse Club. He's in the Rifleman, and then the Rifleman is waning, and he's gotten into the roping. But there's something in between there that I do want to mention. is the fact that he became a singer, a professional singer. So he's singing and he's on, singing a song on Disney. But then he is in 1962, he suddenly has these songs that are hitting the top 40, basically.
We had 5 songs in the top 40. And it was Bob Keane, who I didn't realize at the time, having John later becoming a band leader. Bob Keane had been a band leader in the 30s, 40s, and then developed an independent record label called Delphi Records. And the big hit there was Richie Valance. And this is after Richie Valance had died. But we had Australian friends that came in town and would play tennis with Dad, who said, well, I know this fellow Bob Keane. John should go down and audition with him. And Bob Keane immediately saw Johnny's natural talent singing and put together terrific albums with John, and got some hit songwriters who wrote Cindy's Birthday and Your Nose Is Gonna Grow and Rumors and all of these songs in 1962, just as Johnny's coming off of The Rifleman. The last season, he sang a couple of songs on The Rifleman.
Green Sleeves, I believe, was one of them.
Yeah. And all along The Rifleman, they'd be promoting him between seasons. John would go on tour, and Dad and Mom would go with him to Hawaii, to St. Louis, to New York, wherever. And it would always be a mob. There are shots of John with the crowds around him. And he took it gracefully, easily, like a lark, like going to camp. I can imagine somehow he must have been warped by the experience of being worshipped. And to be worshipped by so many young and beautiful girls at that teenage year, I don't know how that went for him, because we did live very separate lives, different lives. My life in high school and college, and I remember early on, John, was my younger brother, but I had my friends and we did what we did, and John would not be able to do some of the things that we did together. But when we moved to Hollywood, we became true Hollywood hillbillies. We were lucky to live on a hilltop that faced out on the Lake Hollywood, which was undeveloped. And we grew up in our areas, and there were the kids in the Dell. And so there were the people in the Dell that we would battle with the weeds that turned into spears and build forts and whatnot. And then underground hideaways that we do. And that was all part of our rustic upbringing.
Yeah.
John being on the tour and singing was what floored me, is that he hadn't had a singing coach. Bob Keane became a singing coach, but John had a natural way of saying the lyrics that great singers do, that you hear them, but you feel them when they come out of his mouth. And even those songs when he's 17, 18 years old, when he sings Moon River, Lonesome Town, I am awestruck. And it was funny because when he then, as an adult, and that's another great story, how that developed. He's singing with Vince Gioradano's band. He's stationed in New York during Vietnam as 2-year stint in the Army at the Army Photographic Center there, and he's flying helicopters to Alabama and whatnot, making training films. But on the weekends, he got to go into New York and see Broadway. And he's, this is 66, 67. So he's like 22 years old. And
he's flying helicopters?
No, he's riding in the helicopter.
All right. I don't know how much one person can do. That's all I'm saying. Okay. All right. So he's taking helicopter rides, but he's an editor, I believe, in the Army, right?
He's a script supervisor. He's an actor. He's training films on, social diseases and whatnot for the troops.
Yes, try to get some of that footage.
It's a living, and he did something good, because what he was trying to do was prevent problems. That's not a bad thing.
He's working for Uncle Sam.
That's right.
It was very touching, the letters he wrote home while he's in boot camp, when he gets stationed in New York, luckily, instead of Vietnam. And that he gets to go to Broadway. But while he's doing that, he's meeting this great director of Army films, Charlie Turner, who has this great love of 16 millimeter films, has his own home. And on the weekends, he'd go up to Charlie's house and they'd run Fred Astaire movies.
Oh,
And Johnny became totally swept away by Fred Astaire and his method and way of singing. And then Bing Crosby and all of those musicals that they would watch again, along with the musical theater that he would see in New York. And then there was this famous band leader in New York area, society band leader, Vince Gioradano, and the Nighthawks. And he would be up in the Rainbow Room in Rockefeller Center. And I'm not sure of the timeline, because between 67 and 73, we're bouncing around. John's in New York, out in New York. Somewhere in there, John started singing with Vince, and he developed, I saw years later, a card catalog of the lyrics that was like 500 songs that they would do. And how John memorized those songs, but he did. And it was in his blood. And I can see him as that nobody else, I don't think there's film of him doing it, but he'd be doing the clubs with Vince, and he'd be doing Long Island and whatnot as like a Bing Crosby singer. And but it still didn't stick in him in those years while he banged around doing film and doing other things and running a car rental business, high end. At that moment, he became the Naked Ape for Hugh Hefner and did the Naked Ape movie, and then became one of the regulars at Hef's place on Monday nights, because Hefner loved all the classic movies.
Yes, he did.
And John was such an authority on it, as well as, and so it was in the 90s that John finally decided, oh, I could make a living as a band leader, as a singer. And he started developing his bands and got great musicians working with him. Did I take you through from 62 to 92?
Well, but in the middle there, we'll talk about the resurrection of Bronco Billy. So he has this love for Westerns. He's an accomplished roper and writer and such. He's didn't he get some championships? And
yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of Bronco and roping trophies, and would do it as an adult as well. Into his 60s, he would go out team roping.
Well, and so he's an accomplished horseman. Okay. And so then he meets up with John Longenecker, or he's been friends with John Longenecker.
They were friends from the time they were teenagers. From my understanding, John told me they had gone to the Paul Henreid's cotillions. Paul Henreid and his wife, were very old country in their attitude toward how you raise a young person, especially in the Beverly Hills area. And they would have these dinner occasions for the young people. They apparently had a daughter. I've never even asked.
Yeah.
But they met at these cotillions. I believe that's how they actually met.
At the Beverly Wilshire, John Longenecker and Kelly Harmon and Mona Nerney, who is Mona Freeman's daughter. And so we would go there once a month to cotillion dances and met that group of people. And John was totally enamored of Kelly Harmon, and so was John Longenecker, as well as John Crawford, but also her sister, who was just a couple of years older. And
they lived next door to John Longenecker.
They were the Blue-Eyed Girls that moved in next door to John Longenecker and his brother. And
but they were weren't they Nelsons at the time?
And they, no.
That came later.
Tom Harmon's sister.
So, and Mark Harmon. So Mark Harmon's
sister.
Yeah. Okay, Mark Harmon's sister, but then she ended up getting, one of them married Ricky Nelson.
She married Rick, yeah.
There's kind of this whole inner circle of people that.
Kelly, that's her sister, who
Yeah.
I didn't know at the time. And I'm having a real shocking block right now. Is it Chris Nelson?
It's Kristen.
It's Kristen Nelson.
Yeah.
Because then there's Tracy Nelson, her daughter. And the twins. This is quite a story. But we're trying to get to Longenecker and Bronco Billy.
Yeah.
And at this point, Longenecker is gone to USC Film School. And Johnny and I are going up to Lake Arrowhead periodically, where we had a lot, but mostly we had a boat and a dock up there. And we'd meet Longenecker up there at times as well. And John got talking with Johnny about needing to make a student film.
Mhm.
And Johnny came up with this title and idea about Bronco Billy and enamored of the West. And so it was very much Johnny and Longnecker and the team of people at the school that developed this story as they were making it, I think. That's the story I haven't gotten from Longnecker. I should talk to Longnecker to give you a better story, or maybe Longnecker will, on just how the script arrived. But Johnny improvised a lot of it, Longnecker's told me. In the meantime, the cameraman is
John Carpenter.
John
No,
Carpenter is the editor.
Yeah,
And
Nick Castle.
Nick Castle.
Right.
He's a great friend.
Two names that sort of been out there in the world. Yes.
It's a small town.
Yes, it's evidently, yes.
It's a small.
Yeah, they made a name for themselves. You know,
Yeah,
they did all right.
And what was really stunning about it was that Longnecker put it together, put this team together, got the show shot with Chris Nelson at the end is a great payoff in the relationship, and being able to ride off on two bits, and a little bit of stunt filmmaking there that Johnny said, no, we should turn the camera upside down. So it was Johnny and Nick figuring out how they could get Chris up onto the horse.
It looks great. It's absolutely, and it was wonderful to tell that I heard that. It's like, oh, now I see it. But when I watched it first, I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, wait a minute, that's not right. How does that work?
It was awfully graceful, wasn't it?
So graceful,
You
so
know what's
graceful.
so touching too is that years later when John's ill, I'm going with this editor and we're finding a record he did on the Restless one of Ghost Riders in the Sky. And we pulled together film and rough film that I had shot of him doing his big band. But the way he sang Ghost Riders in the Sky for the Restless one on this album was wonderful. And I woke up one night saying, why don't we somehow get a montage? Well, at this point, this lady who runs the site, the JohnnyCrawfordLegacy.com, is a very accomplished editor. I told about this, and she put together a collage at one moment that included that little moment where Johnny's picking up the girl. But I'm taking that back because it's not on Ghost Riders. I think it's on If I Had You. Yeah, I think that's it. There was another montage. We've got these two videos. Anyhow, she did a wonderful montage of John doing the rodeo stuff to Ghost Riders. The other one was a very rough track of If I Had You that Johnny did as a moment at one of the signings at one of the festivals.
Oh, wow.
And he does that. And we were saying, well, it's so awkward and muddy, the photo, but the sound is representative and good. And so I sent that to Stacy. I said, if we could do a little montage of some of these clips, and that's where she used, and what I'm getting at is in this song, as we arrive at that moment, the people go, ah, to something Johnny has done. And now they do it as an ah, as he picks her up. And this is the crowd exclaiming. And I thought it was just a marvelous serendipity to get that moment of film together with John again.
Well, I do want to let everybody know that we are going to be able to show a version online and in person of the resurrection of Bronco Billy, courtesy of Mr. John Longenecker, who we are so appreciative of him being able to willing to share his work that he did, and it certainly is a good tribute. Now, it did okay. I think it did okay in 1970 since it won the Oscar for the best short film, and there's even a clip of the Oscar ceremony where John Longenecker gets to meet, I believe, Sally Kellerman.
It was definitely.
But that's amazing though. And he did tell me that he set out to win the Oscar. He did everything he needed to do, shook the right hands, talked with the right people, did all the things that you're supposed to do in order to get the word out there. And it worked out. And of course, the good news is it was a really neat film. It's an interesting time because, I mean, while Gunsmoke was on TV for another 5 years, Westerns were really kind of changing. I mean, what won the best Oscar that year but Midnight Cowboy, It's sort of a Western, but not really. And I'm just saying is that was the times they were changing. And so to see the resurrection of Bronco Billy, where his character's Bronco Billy, but he's not really being Max Aronson, Gilbert Anderson, Bronco Billy from our Niles Essanay Silent Film Museum, the Essanay Film Studio. He's really playing a drugstore cowboy kind of a guy, and looking
and John Wayne.
Yes, looking a little out of place in modern Los Angeles. But it's obvious that he had in the film that this young man had this love for Westerns. And so watching the whole film again recently, it's such a real slice of life. I feel like maybe it could have been made in 1968, maybe it could have been made in 1972, but watching it's like, that is 1970. I mean, that's it is this time frame that it is etched now because of that film. And it's what a great tribute to that, to the era, the Western era and such. And so we're very happy that we're able to show it.
I have a little tidbit to share with you.
Please.
I'm sorry, I don't remember what. My husband and I, both being members of Screen Actors Guild, do the Film Society things, which were canceled because of COVID. But that's actors and people in the business are allowed to go to screenings before or during, the first release of films. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to somebody as we're standing in line, because it's all very democratic, first come, first served, about it, and an older man. And he said, and I introduced myself, he said something about Rifleman, I guess, or Johnny or something. And he said that movie that he did, the little movie. And I said, brain burp. And he said, I said, oh, you mean Bronco Billy, the resurrection of Bronco Billy? He said, yeah, I voted for that. I said, you did? He said, yeah. He said, but it wasn't so much for the movie. He said, I knew Bronco Billy.
Oh, wow.
And I went, huh? The other thing that we missed that I really want to share is Graham's, of course, told me this one, that once they were settled on the set, which they originally shot in the old Warner set on Western, and I got stopped by a cop driving Johnny to work. And he cringed as I charmed this cop out of giving me a ticket as I exited the freeway. It was the only time in my life anything like that ever happened. And poor John was just so embarrassed. Very shy person in his little way. But they did it there. And then they moved out to what had been the old Monogram Studios in Studio City, which was the place where they shot things like Gilligan's Island. In fact, the boat was still in front of the mansion, and the wrecked boat, and other things, all the other things that were made out there. And they created it seemed like it was a double set. It must have been the town. North Fork was created inside on a set. And they get all comfortable into this new thing. And now they've got townspeople all the time, right? And Johnny requested that some of the people that he knew who had been silent film actors be extras on the show. So that's the last work that Minta Arbuckle did, was as a townswoman. And I'm sure there were others. I don't know who the others were, but Minta Arbuckle stood out because of the dreadful thing that happened to their family and everything, And unfortunately, at the time, I wasn't aware, as I am now, of history, and I never really sat down and talked, because I lived across the street from the studio in an apartment under my grandmother's for a while, and I never thought to just talk to them, and see and hear memories. And now I do regret that, I have to say. It's called, if you know somebody older than you who's had an interesting life, for goodness sake, figure out how to interview them so you can carry those stories with you.
Well, that's actually part of the reason why we're filming you, because we want to
Thank
capture some of these stories
Yeah.
for Johnny and for you all, because it's just such a special situation. This time won't happen again. I mean, where it was this small town and everybody knew each other down the street, and it's not like that now. And we're at the loss for that. But that's part of what it is. I think capturing the memories
Yeah.
is so important.
I got two more for you.
Please.
Right around the corner from there was a little market. I think it's now a shoe store, a sneaker store or something. But it was at the time that we lived there was a market around the corner in Studio City. And Grammy used to do her shopping there, and I did my shopping there. And one day, because Grams always went to the set with Johnny, she was always our guardian for everything that we did. I don't think Mom ever spent a day on a set being a guardian. She had many other things to do, like keep the house and play the piano. She was really trying to work up to a concert career. And so Grammy tells me she goes into the market with John, and the show had just gotten on the air. And this large, buxom woman sees them, and she walks up and she says, "Oh, I love you on the show." And she grabs him to her very voluminous bosom. And Grammy thought he was going to get smothered. I mean, my grandmother didn't talk like that. She's a very Victorian lady. But Johnny was like shaken. I mean, he treated the lady well and everything. And oh, thank you. But he became a little bit leery of people after that. And in '61, I was living in Nashville, and they did Johnny's first tour without Chuck. And I think he sang in that one. I don't remember, but I get a phone call saying we're going to be in Atlanta, and would you like we'll fly you down to visit. And I don't remember any of the other details of this, except my dad said, when you get on the plane and you get off in Atlanta, for God's sake, don't start singing Marching Through Georgia. Our dad had a really terrific sense of humor. But anyway, I go to this occasion, and it's at a baseball park in Atlanta. And I can't remember much about it, except the place was crowded with fans, and it was a wonderful crowd. It was an absolutely wonderful crowd, and Johnny was sensational. And I don't even remember what he did. I think he sang. I'm sure he did the rope, and he just entertained these folks on his own, and they had not thought to get security. And we're coming down. We were close enough that we were able to get out of the grandstand and go down to the field. And the crowd did that too. And all of a sudden, the family, I mean, those of us who were there, Dad, Mom, or just Dad and Johnny, I forget even that. But all of a sudden, we were packed around with people. And I could see John was kind of nervous about this, but they were full of so much love. They were so loving, and they were so considerate, that
well, that's good.
Well, no, but I mean, that's just the way it was. All of us, I think I created the first tour bus stop at Universal when I was working on Tales from Wells Fargo. The tour bus was going around, and they stopped, and I remembered being a little kid and being impressed on seeing all these famous people that I was working with, and this and that. And here we're on a Western set, and we're on a break, and they stopped, and I just went up to the bus, and the guy opened the door, and I got in and said hi. I didn't even tell him who I was, because I think the most important thing that was for me, and for John too, was we all love people, and we're very trusting. Oh, probably too trusting. But I loved remembering that moment of all of these truly loving people who, when they realized they were crowding around, didn't have to be told, back off a little bit, you know? And it was,
We could use that in the world nowadays. That
oh,
sounds
please, yeah,
nice to hear that,
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I needed to share that.
The main thing is that we are able to talk about how amazing, what a raconteur this gentleman was. He did so many different things that were all very different from each other, but they meshed really well together. It's amazing to me with, okay, so he's a horseman, well, but the acting came first, but then he's in Westerns, and then, he's singing songs from the movies that he loved. And I think it's wonderful to celebrate someone who did so many different things. He did pass last year, and after a really tough time, I think for a few years there. I'm glad we get to talk about his life and what he did to really live it to the fullest. He did so many different things that I have siblings, and I know they're proud of me, and it's really wonderful to hear you talking about all the different things that he accomplished. And I know that anybody, if you go to any of the conventions or anything like that, they're going to want a little bit of that as well as whatever you've done. I mean, it's kind of, you're kind of representing him, and you've done a really lovely job here. And I'm so grateful that you've shared these stories, because only if you've lived it can you share them. And it's amazing. It's an amazing thing.
Well, I have all of this could kind of be summed up with one quote. At the Naked 8 premiere afterwards, we were all bussed in small minibuses up to the Playboy Mansion, because Hef was the producer. I'd never met the man. And I'm sitting at a table, and Johnny introduced me to Hef as his younger sister. Okay. How do you do? Didn't know what to talk to the man about, had no idea. At that time, I still hadn't heard the stories about the movies every Monday night and all of that. And quite frankly, the second time I went to the mansion was at the reception for the wedding, because Hef and his wife asked Charlotte and Johnny if they could throw him a reception, which was astonishing. And I wish I had pictures, but it was very intimate, but beautifully done. And, but at this party, I'm sitting there and, we're just whatever we're doing, gawking at whoever was there. And Hef leans over me. He says, "Your brother is a pussycat." That was John.
I'm sure I haven't covered all the things I'd like to say about John. I just, when I've been at these celebrations of him, it just tickles me to know that so many people really enjoy what he's done, and that it's available now in our world. Mm-hmm. I think in a certain way, forever, that he's a click away, twice a day, all around the world on the Rifleman, as this iconic cowboy that he was. Mm-hmm. And the great writing that was done on those shows, and there are a lot of great episodes. And I get tickled every time I happen to see one again. But that also his musical career, both as a teen and as an adult, is instantly available on YouTube around the world. Mm-hmm. And we're working in collecting a lot more of the stuff that's not yet been seen. I hope to have over time on these legacy sites that have been set up for him. And so I'm tickled that you and I and the rest of everybody who's got the chance gets to enjoy him. And I think John would be thrilled at being that kind of icon now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, has Rifleman ever been off the air?
It hasn't, no, remarkably. It's one of the most successful ever syndicated shows.
Actually, I was told by, I think it was Laven on a phone conversation, that John, that the show was their second most popular of the half-hour black and white series
Huh.
next to I Love Lucy.
Whoa.
And it has remained there. In fact, remember our friend, I can never remember the guy who took you to Disneyland he was from Australia, I think. He took my brothers to Disneyland. He said, I'll take the kids to Disneyland. He came back in the house, sat down in one of the club chairs, threw his feet up and said, I will never go to Disneyland again.
You what?
I will never go to Disneyland again.
Disneyland.
You guys are red and ragged.
Oh.
But he told me that he went to visit someone in England and he walked into the hotel, and this is how long ago it was. The hotel's TV was in the lobby and there was Johnny.
Oh.
And not 6 months later, he walked into a hotel in Japan and there's Johnny speaking Japanese.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, it's never
Worldwide.
been up there.
Worldwide. That's
I
amazing.
want to compliment you too, that you have the Essanay Museum there, the Silent Film Museum. I was unaware of it. And it's really wonderful thing.
Yeah,
that
I'm
you've
looking
got going
forward to
there.
visiting you guys. I really
Yeah.
am.
So we are really happy that we're able to celebrate Johnny Crawford and Diana Sarah Carey, known as Baby Peggy back in the day, two child actors that did great things as they grew up and into adults, very accomplished people. And we are so happy that you spent some time with us. We got to visit about you and what you've all done. Very important people as far as I'm concerned. And I just want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
For doing it and for putting it on.
Bronco